Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to the show. My guest in the studio today is Timber Hawkeye, author of Buddhist Bootcamp. Hi, Timber. Welcome to the show. And in today's interview, we're going to talk about finding the teacher within. And Timber, I wanted to start with a quote from your book. You say, "This book is not about being a Buddhist. It's about being a Buddha. God is not out there to pursue. God is in our heart to discover." Can you say more about what you mean by that?
I think it's much like when you find a good therapist. They never tell you what to do. They help you look within yourself and find the answer that's been there all along. And I believe that's what the Buddha intended for us to do, is to look within, because that's where the answers are. And it's not about finding, and I use the term God very loosely. It can mean whatever people want it to mean. It's not so important the name we give it as much as the gratitude we have for it. And it's not out there. We keep thinking we'll find it. The problem with thinking that it's out there is we have an idea of what it is we're looking for, and we might bump into God, so to speak, and just regard it as just a stranger on the bus. And so by letting go of the idea of what God looks like Gandhi said, if you can't find God in the next person you meet, there's no point looking for him anywhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting. I also, another way I was reflecting on this was in our first interview, we talked about your experience in the corporate world and how you walked away from that to live a much simpler life. One of the things I was reflecting on is how somehow we almost look for God in money, in the success, like we're trying to find something outside of us, which maybe we wouldn't call God, but we're trying to find something to fill something up, to give us a sense of something.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of your teaching is about turning within.
Yeah.
Can you say more about how that was for you in a sense, and that evolution away from looking outside of yourself and what supported that transition?
Absolutely. My friend Laura Best says that there's a God-shaped hole in our hearts and nothing else can fill it. And so we try to fill it with money and cars and sex and drugs and whatever, and nothing will actually fit. It's just like we're trying to fit a circle in a square. And for a long time I had resisted the entire idea of faith or God because I was so logical. And faith is so illogical. But that doesn't mean that they can't coexist. And so for me, the journey from being so logical, so science and whatnot, to finding that when all is said and done, we really don't know. We don't know what's making our heart beat right now, or the planet spin, or the grass grow. It just does. And in that, I found the liberation from letting go of the need to know, if that makes sense. Yes. I let go of trying to find an answer and say, that's what's making it happen. So I just left it open, and something is, and I don't need to give it a name. Again, the word God is just used so commonly, and then we throw it out there, but it could be Mother Nature or Father Time or the Energizer Bunny. I don't know where the batteries are, but something is making my heart beat, and my practice is just a life of gratitude for that happening.
Yes, and that can be a very painful transition for people, in that recognition that they've dedicated their life to obtaining things around them, and this idea that if I have that car or I earn that salary or whatever, then I'm going to feel a certain way. And then when they don't, that's very painful for people.
Well, what it does is it puts happiness very far away from us. That happiness is contingent upon certain things happening. I mean, look at the language we use around it. You know, in America, what are we entitled to? The pursuit of happiness. Not happiness, mind you, just the pursuit thereof.
Right.
And so even happiness and success and joy and a purpose in life is not something that we can, by language, find where we are now, but we're told by society that it's out there somewhere, and we first have to look a certain way and make a certain amount of money. And it's one of the biggest lies that's being perpetuated, and it was really good for me to zoom out in a way and look at the world and go, okay, who is following that recipe of you get the house, you get the 2-car garage, you get the money, you get the bank account, you get married, you have the 2 kids, and then you're happy? Show me someone who followed that recipe and is happy,
Right.
and we'll have something to talk about. And we don't have that many role models that recipe can actually work for everyone.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you can't be happy with the car and the stuff and all that, but that's not where happiness comes from.
It's not the source.
No.
Yeah, and it seems that often for people, what fuels that transition from looking for happiness outside of them to recognizing that it's something to look within is often pain. It's often that it's something is become the pursuit, let's say, has become so painful that there becomes the question, there must be another way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that pain, when we recognize that we create our own suffering, is the first step. It's normally way down the road because we spend such a great majority of our lives trying to blame someone else for our pain. It's when we own it, when we assume responsibility for it and say, I'm doing this to myself. You know, my dad told me a joke when I was a kid about a guy who goes to the doctor and says, Doc, every time I drink tea, my eye hurts. Every time I drink tea, my eye hurts. And it's because he left the spoon in the cup and he poked himself in the eye. And so often we do exactly that. We create our own suffering by the choices that we make. And then we go, well, I can't help it. And we're the only ones who can help it.
Yes. It's almost like, in a sense, that pain becomes a teacher. It becomes an invitation, perhaps, for something different.
Because we want a way out of it. And we realize that, hey, what I'm doing, I'm digging a hole and then I'm complaining that I'm in a hole. And so the first thing to do is stop digging and then go, how can I've tried going this way. Why don't I try another way? And we live in a time right now when there are so many role models now of people who are not following that recipe, who are doing something very different. And they're all doing the same, they're all saying the same thing. Happiness is within, God is within. Everything is right here. We were born with it. And it's just about tapping back into it and finding that joy that we had when we were little kids. And it's by dropping those judgments. It's about dropping those labels. My dad observed my journey and said, you're not trying to learn anything new here. You're trying to be 2 years old again, aren't you? And I said, absolutely. I look at them in awe. They're just so, they look at the world with wonder. They don't care if other kids in the playground are black or white or what their political affiliation is. They just care, can you play nice? And that's all it takes, and I think we can get there too.
And what also really interests me, and it's something that I think you say 3 times in the book, that we mistakenly worship teachers rather than teachings. And what it made me think was that for so many, throughout history, the teaching has been that the answers are in a set religion or a set structure, and you follow that set of practices, and that's your path to fulfillment. And what you're saying is that there's pain or suffering, whatever, is an invitation for something to happen, but rather than looking for a teacher to solve that, it's turning within.
Yeah, every time I went to my teachers and told them, I love Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama or Pema Chodron, they would say, be careful there. And, focus on the teachings and not the teacher. My greatest invitation came when I read that Shunryu Suzuki said, there are no enlightened beings. There's only enlightened activity. And that was so wonderful to hear, that the people we perceive to be as enlightened are just people like you and I who made enlightened activity a part of their daily lives. And I read that thinking, well, I can do that, and that was because then I'm not looking up to someone, I'm just saying, I'm looking within going, I can do this.
Yes.
And that's where the empowerment comes from.
Yeah, I hear you. It gives an empowerment, but it also brings a responsibility somehow, which is a gift, but it's also, that can be challenging sometimes for people.
Yeah, because we have the habitual tendency of making somebody else's responsibility. It's within our language. We blame others for how we feel instead of owning it ourselves and saying, this is a choice that I am making. And so, it's a huge responsibility, but it's our happiness we're talking about. Not assuming responsibility for it puts happiness in somebody else's hands. and we don't know what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, yeah. And in a sense, it's remarkable. I find it remarkable how so many people spend so much of their life struggling and in pain and trying to fix things on the surface in such a way that just doesn't address the real underlying struggles and the real things that are going on.
Yeah.
You say in the book that Buddha literally means awakened one, and there are lots of Buddhas, not one. I'm interested though, in a sense, part of what it seems supports someone finding the teacher within is also having good teachers around them, especially that don't kind of lord up the teacher position, but it sounds like your teachers really encourage that practice.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what are some of the either the schools or the teachers or the teachings that have supported your process.
Well, I moved from Israel to the States first year of high school or so, and it was really interesting because I didn't really know about all the different cultures and religions at the time. And, December rolled around and people put dead trees in the living rooms, and it was very confusing.
Yes.
But instead of getting judgmental, I got very curious. And so my teachers and my lessons have come from just diving into the deep end and meeting with people who were Mormon or Catholic or, the Hare Krishnas, and just sitting with different groups. And I think what I found is that compassion is the common thread through all of them, and that every religion has something to offer, but no one has everything to offer. So the idea is to be open-minded enough to honor the fact that everyone has something to give us, has something for us to learn. Everyone you meet knows something that you don't. So
It reminds me of, do you want to say something about the first, I can't remember if it's law or rule or teaching of Buddhist boot camp, is that the opposite of what you believe is also true.
The opposite of what you know is also true, yeah. I made it the first principle because the moment you accept that to someone else, somewhere else, because of their time, place, and circumstance, their version of the truth is different than yours, their reality is different than yours, then it invites you to accept that even if you don't agree with it, it's just as real to them as your reality is real to you. And sometimes we have to go to the other side of the world to see that. For us, it's wrong to drive on the left side of the road, and here it's common or the law. So
it's not a good idea to drive.
No, I've been honked at a couple of times this past week, but the opposite of what you know is also true really takes into consideration and invites you to be gentle with yourself, even with your own beliefs, that they can and do change over time. And sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you have to let go a little bit of what you've been clinging on to for so long because it no longer serves you. And that is really important, to be gentle with ourselves, because if we, and that's the problem, is a lot of people identify themselves with their beliefs. So when you approach them with a different set of beliefs, they feel personally attacked because it's part of their identity. And that's a really dangerous place to be. Whereas, if you don't identify yourself by your beliefs, but you have your values, then when someone comes to you with a different belief, you go, tell me more about that. I'm interested, I'm intrigued.
And of course, if someone identifies themselves as their beliefs, if those beliefs start to get challenged, it raises a beautiful but also often challenging question of, well, who am I? If I'm not that set of beliefs, who am I?
For me, I'm a lot of things, and not one of them defines me.
Yes.
And so letting go of a label has been the most liberating thing. Yes, universally challenged by every medium out there because they all want to stick a label on me. But it feels so freeing to say, this is true, but this is also true for me.
And that reminds me of another quote I really liked, which was, it's perfectly possible to believe in God but not the Bible, to be religious but never go to church, and to even downright hate the church and religion, but love God.
Yeah.
And part of what I really hear you saying is that it's really important to be free of structures, especially oppressive structures.
Yeah.
And yet there's also a place where sometimes structures or certain practices can be very important.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what practices, structures you found have supported you in your involvement.
Well, yeah, when you first said it's not good to have structure, and then you said oppressive structure, I'm like, yes, oppressive one is not good. It's about looking at our structure and going, is this working for me or against me? And so the invitation in the book and through my talks and everything is for each of us to find our own structure, to write out our values. You know, what kind of person do you want to be in the world?
Yes.
And then cross-reference that with your behavior and say, am I living in line with my values? And so you create your own structure, and when you act outside of it, it doesn't sit well, you know, and you go, I raised my voice today, and that's not the kind of person I want to be. And so your structure is you, and it's flexible, you know, it expands and extracts, and it's really great because you're not being told what to do. In fact, when we're told what to do by an outside force, we tend to retaliate and rebel. But when it comes from within, then you're motivated to keep going, because this is your purpose. This is your intention in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also, in terms of finding the teacher within, it also is something that comes through very much in the book, is the role of other people, be that community, be that friends, be those around you. Why do you feel that's important? What role does that play in facilitating someone's opening?
It's everyone is a mirror, and so they mirror back to us, especially if we invite them to. If you're in a relationship and you share your values with them and you say, this is the kind of person I want to be, you're inviting them to mirror back to you when a certain decision is not in line with your values, not theirs.
And that's the challenging piece.
That's the challenge, is when you're in a relationship, don't push your beliefs on someone else. In fact, a healthy relationship is not one of mutual opinion, it's one of mutual respect. And so if two people respect one another, they can help each other on their individual paths. And so other people are very helpful. You know, when I still go to so many different people and run my ideas and thoughts past them to say, you know, help me navigate through this, because we will inevitably always have at least two opposing thoughts in our heads. And if you study cognitive dissonance, then you know how easy it is to, through habitual tendencies, to justify just about everything we're going to do. But when you have the support group, they point it out to you, like, you're totally justifying this, and it's not in line with your values. Just change your perspective.
Yeah, and of course it takes a lot of openness to be able to allow that kind of feedback, because, you know, as we were saying a little bit earlier, when we define ourselves by our beliefs and our positions and the way we see things, when somebody potentially challenges that, we have to be open to going, wow, is what they're saying true? Is there something I'm not wanting to see here?
And it's not always somebody, it could be a situation. You know, I'll use a very personal example. When I was in high school, my girlfriend at the time got pregnant. It was actually just as I graduated high school. She was epileptic, and she was taking Tegretol for epilepsy. And the Tegretol canceled out the birth control pills. And though she was pro-life, she found herself in a very difficult situation because her beliefs were so set on one thing, and yet here the universe presented her with an opportunity to re-examine, you know, how tightly we hold on to something when we're challenged to consider alternatives.
Yes.
And my job was to just say, I will hold your hand no matter what. And that's the challenge, is to just realize that people and the universe itself will challenge us. And yeah, be flexible.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of courage to follow what we know to be true when it's not necessarily comfortable.
Oh yeah.
And do you feel that courage is something that's just instinctive, or that's something people cultivate, or because I think for a lot of people on you could call it a spiritual path or whatever, there's often fear, in many ways. When we were talking about when we start to let go of a constructed sense of self and to question who we are, it's often very physically scary when that happens. What are your thoughts on how we work with fear? Or
the courage is developed through creating a new habitual tendency of not shying away from something that's uncomfortable. The more often we do it, the easier it becomes, and the less we let fear rule our lives. Everything, when we boil it down, either stems from love or from fear. And so when we find ourselves in a situation, then we can better navigate and duck and dive through the situation to find, okay, I see that fear is trying to control me here, and I made a vow to live through love. And so you make the love base, as uncomfortable as it may be, it becomes more comfortable the more you do it, and fear just kind of fades away. It'll rear its head every once in a while, and you're going to recognize and go, I see you, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm not going to go there anymore.
So we have about a minute left. I just wanted to end with another quote and maybe just a reflection on it, which was that a common question is, what's the harm in praying for world peace? And the problem lies in the idea that it's somebody else's responsibility to make peace happen. Peace begins with you. So if you want to know how close we are to world peace, look within.
Absolutely. If changing the world is your fight, it will exhaust you. But if it's your way of life, it's so every moment is a moment of joy and happiness, because you're living to, as Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So it's all about within. I see so many people who are fighting for peace, and there's a dichotomy there, like here you are and you're fighting, you're aggressive to prove that aggression is not the way to go. And it's much like Mother Teresa said, if you invite me to an anti-war rally, I won't go. But if you invite me to a pro-peace rally, I will be there.
That's very beautiful. That's great. Thank you, Timber.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you for watching. And if you want to find out more about Timber and his book and his work, you can visit www.buddhistbootcamp.com. Thanks for watching.